The phone rang at 3:17 a.m., piercing through the darkness of Whitney Houston's Beverly Hills mansion, and her hands trembled as she reached across the silk sheets to answer it. The caller ID showed a familiar New Jersey number. Her mother, Sissy Houston. "Whitney, honey, you okay?" Sissy's warm, concerned voice traveled through the phone lines like a lifeline. "I couldn't sleep either, baby. I keep thinking about tonight." What would happen in just 18 hours at the 36th Annual Grammy Awards would transform Whitney Elizabeth Houston from a global pop superstar into an immortal legend. But in those pre-dawn hours of March 1st, 1994, all Whitney could feel was the crushing weight of expectation pressing down on her chest like a stone. "Mama, what if I mess this up?" Whitney whispered into the phone, her usually powerful voice barely audible above the hum of the central air conditioning. "The whole world's watching me tonight. 15 million people are going to be judging every single note I sing." The Bodyguard soundtrack had dominated the charts for 8 months. I Will Always Love You had spent 14 weeks at number one, breaking records industry experts thought were unbreakable. The film had grossed over $410 million worldwide. She was at the absolute pinnacle of her career. But success at this level came with a price few could understand. "Baby girl," Sissy said softly, her voice carrying all the wisdom of a woman who had sung backup for Aretha Franklin and Elvis Presley. "You've been singing since you could form words in your mouth. You were humming melodies before you could walk properly. Trust the gift that God Almighty gave you, Whitney. It's never failed you before." But Whitney knew something her mother didn't know, something she hadn't told anyone in her inner circle. Not even her closest friends or most trusted advisors. For the past 7 days, she'd been waking up in cold sweats at 4 a.m., her throat feeling tight and constricted, her famous voice seeming fragile and uncertain when she attempted her morning vocal exercises. The relentless pressure of having to deliver absolute perfection every single time she opened her mouth was slowly suffocating her spirit and making her question everything she'd worked for. The sun was beginning to rise over the Hollywood Hills when Whitney finally gave up on sleep entirely. She padded barefoot across the cold marble floors of her master bathroom and stared at her reflection in the enormous mirror that dominated one wall. The face looking back at her was still beautiful, the same face that had graced the covers of countless magazines and movie posters. But her eyes betrayed the exhaustion and anxiety that was eating at her from the inside. At exactly 8 a.m., Whitney's longtime friend and personal hairstylist Ellen LeVar arrived at the mansion, her arms loaded with styling equipment, hot rollers, and enough hairspray to survive a hurricane. She found Whitney sitting at her granite kitchen table, still wearing her silk pajamas, staring blankly at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold and untouched. "Whit, honey, you look like you haven't slept properly in days," Ellen said with genuine concern, setting down her professional styling kit and immediately assessing her friend's condition with the practiced eye of someone who had been working with celebrities for over 2 decades. "I haven't slept," Whitney admitted with startling, raw honesty. "Ellen, I need to tell you something, and I need you to promise me you won't repeat it to anyone. What if tonight's the night I finally disappoint everyone who's ever believed in me? What if I get up there and my voice just fails?" This wasn't the confident, larger-than-life Whitney Houston that the world knew and adored. This wasn't the woman who had effortlessly belted out, "I Want to Dance with Somebody" to stadium crowds, or delivered spine-tingling renditions of "The Star-Spangled Banner" at major sporting events. This was a vulnerable human being carrying the enormous weight of millions of fans' dreams and expectations, record executives' financial investments, and industry professionals' reputations. This was the Whitney who had systematically broken down racial barriers in the music industry and redefined what a black woman could achieve in mainstream pop culture. Tonight, in the privacy of her own kitchen, she was simply scared. The Grammy Awards ceremony was being held at the iconic Radio City Music Hall in New York City, a venue that had hosted legendary performances by everyone from Frank Sinatra to the Rockettes. Whitney's management team had reserved the entire top floor of the prestigious Plaza Hotel for her preparation and relaxation. By 2 p.m. Eastern Time, the luxurious suite was buzzing with controlled chaos. Professional makeup artists laying out their palettes, wardrobe consultants steaming gowns, personal bodyguards coordinating security details, and nervous Arista Records executives making last-minute phone calls to ensure every detail was perfect. Clive Davis, Whitney's mentor and the powerful president of Arista Records, arrived at precisely 3 p.m., his silver hair perfectly styled and his designer suit immaculate as always. He found Whitney standing motionlessly by the floor-to-ceiling windows of the hotel suite, looking down at the bustling street scene below, where New Yorkers hurried past in their daily lives, completely unaware that music history was about to be made just blocks away. "Nervous?" Clive asked gently, his voice carrying the warmth and understanding of someone who had guided the careers of legendary artists for over 3 decades. Whitney turned to face him slowly, her eyes reflecting a vulnerability that few people ever witnessed. "Terrified," she admitted without hesitation. Clive Davis had discovered Whitney when she was just 19 years old, performing in nightclubs and dreaming of stardom. He'd carefully guided her through an incredible journey that included 7 number-one singles, 6 Grammy Awards, and over 100 million records sold worldwide. He'd watched her grow from a talented young woman with enormous potential into one of the most successful recording artists in music history. But in all their years of working together, he'd never seen her this emotionally exposed and vulnerable. "Whitney, do you remember what I told you the very first day we met at Arista Records?" Clive asked, moving closer to the window where she stood. She nodded slowly, a small smile finally breaking across her face. "You said I had a voice that could heal the broken hearts of the entire world. Tonight, let it do exactly that." At 4:30 p.m., there was an unexpected knock on the hotel suite door that surprised everyone in the room. Kevin Costner, Whitney's co-star from The Bodyguard and one of Hollywood's biggest leading men, walked into the elegant space carrying a single perfect white rose and wearing the kind of genuine smile that had made him America's sweetheart. "Thought you might need this," he said simply, offering the delicate flower to Whitney with a slight bow that was both playful and respectful. Whitney's eyes immediately filled with tears that she tried desperately to blink away. Kevin had become much more than just a co-star during the intense months of filming The Bodyguard. He'd transformed into a protective older brother figure who understood the unique pressures of being in the entertainment spotlight. Their on-screen romantic chemistry had been absolutely electric and had convinced audiences worldwide, but their genuine off-screen friendship and mutual respect was the real magic that had made their professional partnership so special and enduring. "Kevin, I'm so scared that I'm going to disappoint everyone who's counting on me tonight," Whitney confessed, her voice cracking slightly with emotion. "What if I get up there and I'm not good enough? What if I forget the words? What if my voice breaks at the worst possible moment?" Kevin sat down beside her on the plush hotel room couch, his presence immediately calming and reassuring. "Whitney, I've worked with a lot of incredibly talented people throughout my career in Hollywood. Actors, directors, musicians, writers, some of the most creative minds in the entertainment industry. But what you have isn't just talent or training or even exceptional natural ability. It's a direct, unfiltered connection to something divine and spiritual. Trust that connection tonight." He paused for a moment, studying her face carefully and choosing his next words with the precision of someone who understood exactly what she needed to hear. "Remember the very first day of filming The Bodyguard? You were absolutely terrified then, too. You thought you couldn't act, that you didn't belong on a movie set, that everyone would see through you and realize you were just pretending. Look what happened when you trusted yourself." Whitney smiled genuinely for the first time all day, feeling some of the crushing anxiety begin to lift from her shoulders. Kevin was absolutely right, as he so often was. The Bodyguard had not only been a massive commercial success, earning over $410 million worldwide, but it had also proven conclusively that Whitney could excel in arenas far beyond music, establishing her as a legitimate actress and opening doors to opportunities she'd never imagined possible. At exactly 6 p.m., Whitney's sleek black limousine pulled up to the iconic Radio City Music Hall, where thousands of fans had gathered behind velvet ropes hoping to catch a glimpse of their favorite stars. The red carpet was absolutely swarming with photographers from major publications, television reporters doing live broadcasts, and entertainment journalists frantically scribbling notes. Camera flashes began exploding like continuous lightning strikes the moment Whitney emerged from the vehicle in a stunning white beaded gown, designed by the acclaimed fashion designer Mark Bauer. The intricate beadwork catching and reflecting the bright lights like stars in a night sky. Whitney! Whitney! Over here! Look this way! The shouts from photographers and fans were absolutely deafening, creating a wall of sound that would have been overwhelming for most people. But as she walked slowly down the famous red carpet, stopping periodically to pose for pictures and answer carefully selected questions from reporters, something profound began to shift inside Whitney's consciousness. The scared, anxious woman from the hotel suite was gradually transforming back into the confident performer who had conquered stages around the world. The little girl from Newark, who had sung gospel hymns in her mother's church choir every Sunday, was finally stepping fully into her destined role as one of music's greatest voices. Inside Radio City Music Hall, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Music industry executives, fellow recording artists, celebrities from film and television, and critics who had the power to make or break careers filled every seat in the historic venue. This wasn't just another awards show. This was the night's most important cultural event, watched by millions of people around the globe who would form lasting opinions based on what they witnessed. Backstage in her private dressing room, Whitney found a quiet corner away from all the activity and dialed her mother's familiar phone number one more time. "I can do this, Mama," she said with newfound conviction in her voice. "I can really do this." "I know you can, baby girl," Sissy replied, her voice warm with pride and confidence. "I've always known you could do anything you set your mind to. Now go out there and remind the world why God gave you that incredible gift." At exactly 8:47 p.m. Eastern Time, as millions of viewers watched from their living rooms across America and around the world, Whitney Houston was introduced to perform "I Will Always Love You," the song that had dominated radio airwaves and touched hearts in ways that few pieces of music ever achieve. As she walked confidently onto the Grammy stage wearing her gorgeous white gown, something absolutely magical and unexpected happened. The entire audience of seasoned music industry professionals, cynical critics, and fellow artists spontaneously rose to their feet in unified anticipation, creating a moment of respect and anticipation that veteran Grammy attendees said they had never witnessed before in the awards show's long history. Whitney approached the microphone with grace and poise, and for one perfect moment, the vast Radio City Music Hall auditorium fell completely, utterly silent. 15 million viewers were watching intently at home, hanging on every second. The pressure should have been completely overwhelming for any human being. But then Whitney opened her mouth, and the first crystalline note of "I Will Always Love You" filled Radio City Music Hall like a sacred prayer, soaring to the ornate ceiling and wrapping around every person present like a warm embrace. Her voice moved through the historic venue with such raw power, technical perfection, and genuine emotion that seasoned music executives who had heard thousands of performances found themselves fighting back tears and struggling to maintain their professional composure. This wasn't simply a performance or entertainment. It was a spiritual experience that transcended the boundaries between performer and audience, creating a moment of shared human connection that everyone present would remember for the rest of their lives. Kevin Costner, sitting in the audience among Hollywood's elite, felt goosebumps cover his arms and travel down his spine as Whitney's voice washed over him. He'd heard her sing this particular song dozens of times during the filming of The Bodyguard, in recording studios and on movie sets, but tonight was completely different. Tonight, Whitney wasn't just singing the song with technical excellence. She was living every word, pouring her entire soul into each note, transforming Dolly Parton's beautiful composition into something entirely new and transcendent. When Whitney reached the song's climactic bridge, her voice climbing to seemingly impossible heights that defied the normal limits of human vocal ability, the audience completely forgot they were at a formal award ceremony. They were witnessing something that would become legendary, a performance that would be studied by vocal coaches and cherished by music lovers for generations to come. As the final, perfect note hung in the air like a blessing, the silence lasted for what felt like an eternity. Then Radio City Music Hall erupted in the kind of thunderous standing ovation that is reserved only for the most historic and meaningful moments in entertainment history. Whitney stood on that stage, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face, as 6,000 people gave her the longest sustained ovation in Grammy Awards history. 4 minutes and 37 seconds of pure, unbridled appreciation that seemed to go on forever. The morning after, newspaper headlines across America told the incredible story: Whitney Houston conquers the Grammys, the voice of a generation delivers pure magic, and Houston, we have absolute perfection. But the response that meant the most came in a handwritten note from Dolly Parton herself. "Dear Whitney, I wrote that song, but you made it immortal. Thank you for giving my words wings that will soar forever." That Grammy night transformed Whitney Houston from a pop superstar into a music legend whose influence would span generations. The performance became the gold standard for vocal excellence, emotional connection, and artistic integrity that aspiring singers would study and attempt to emulate for decades to come. Years later, when music historians and critics compiled definitive lists of the greatest Grammy performances in the awards show's history, Whitney's 1994 rendition consistently ranked at number one, cited as the perfect marriage of technical skill and emotional authenticity. The scared woman who had trembled at 3:17 a.m. that morning had become an immortal icon by midnight, proving that greatness often emerges not despite our fears, but because we find the courage to face them and transform them into something truly beautiful.